was to do a presentation, but I'm really keen for people to have an opportunity to talk and ask other people questions if that's what they want to do. So I'm going to do a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, just something quick, because just a bit of difference, just in case you don't know it, you probably don't know anything about what we do or what we're doing, but 6 years ago, I delivered 35 years of services, so the last 20 procured. I work as a business mentor for start-up, charities, occasionally big organisations, internal things, you know, like conflict, and when organisations are not working to their fullest capacity. So I've had the opportunity to work in lots of different areas. 6 years ago, I won a £500,000 commission from the Police and Crime Commissioner in South East Wales to create a whole family domestic abuse service. That service, with 6 partners in a consortium, worked together, and one of the things that was my thing was it couldn't be gendered. It couldn't be gendered because I delivered 14 years of housing related and supporting people services, and I knew that domestic abuse wasn't gendered. So we created this, and from that, first of all, we were getting little shenanigans in the community, as you do, of services and all of that, and I got to a point and I thought, okay, because it was a licensed intervention, so the intervention was meant to go out into the community and to train people, and everybody could deliver it if they wanted to. Police and Crime Commissioner was going to support funding and all of that. I got some, I always say it's just naughty behaviour, a little bit of naughty behaviour, so I decided to go to Welsh Government directly and to the National Assembly, and I met with 15 MLA equivalents in South East Wales, and that's to go there. They asked me a few questions. Sally, why shouldn't it be non-gendered? What's the need? And so I ended up looking at research I'd never looked at before. And in the 6 to 12 weeks it took me to do that, I felt like my whole environment was in the twilight zone. I then went and looked at 21 acts of law in the UK, globally. I incorporated acts of law that were relevant to services and some that weren't. And I cross-referenced them. So I looked for incompatibility or compatibility. So most of you run services will probably already know that family court law and housing, they don't work together. And the reason they don't work together is because if you've got a low-income family where accommodation is needed for both parents to be able to have the child, if children's services are involved, the Housing Act does not have to give both parents the accommodation. They don't have to do that, which will instantly lock out one parent, right? Like there's an incompatibility. So I did a year's research, and I took this to anybody that would listen, and I ended up going on and doing a further 3.5 years research. The last year I looked at societal narrative. Then I backtracked it because I looked at over 15 countries internationally, because I thought, wow, the UK's got it wrong. Let me look for best practice. I wasn't looking for trouble, I was looking for best practice. So I looked at all these countries. It took a long time, and I ended up being steered back to the United Nations, okay? Because I saw there was a common narrative through policy, risk management systems, legislation, common narrative. Now, I backtracked this to the Istanbul Convention. Okay, I looked at all of these pieces of legislation, and what I realised was there was a powerhouse that was locking out men having equality in services, and it's the Istanbul Convention. I am a believer that we need a convention, so I'm not disrespecting the Istanbul Convention as in answering needs, but the Istanbul Convention, for those who may not know, it is the violence against women and girls. It is a protector against that. And countries are meant to ratify. And lots of countries have signed up to it and they've worked towards it. UK ratified in July this year. Now, the Istanbul Convention, what it does is, it does not provide anything for men. Now, there's lots of people who say it does in the UK, but actually it just doesn't. So, I wanted to talk about impact, right? Because I've delivered services, I work in services, so I was very interested in impact. Northern Ireland currently is working towards a violence against women and girls policy. That is based and coming from the Istanbul Convention. So you've got the Istanbul Convention, you've got your domestic abuse bill, you've got the guidance that comes from that. Bills tend to be ambiguous in gender. They're very neutralised, they're as they should be to some degree. Guidance then will take over, and it can be a problem. It's why it takes a long time going through Parliament. Guidance is always the headache. Then you go into policy, violence against women and girls policy. Once that policy is created, that is then adopted through every single service. And with this one, it impacts on every single risk management process that a service has. The risk management process, in terms of the rest of the UK at the moment, Northern Ireland is in a position where you're only starting that journey, and you have been leaders, you really have. You've had a balanced narrative through all of your policies that weren't present in the rest of the UK, right? It just wasn't. I know that some have said to me here that, yeah, okay, Sally, you know, it's there, but some of it's a bit tokenistic and we don't actually take it all the way. That's okay, but your narrative is there. With the violence against women and girls policies in the rest of the UK, it pulled all of that out. It shredded it all. It just yanked it out kicking and screaming. And what it did was, it's implemented a process now of fiscal management, and the review of every single policy only contains the needs of women and girls. And even where they say they don't, because one of the arguments that I've been told here is currently Northern Ireland are the only area that don't provide hostile environment for men who are seeking to flee domestic abuse. There are still only a handful of hostels in the whole of the UK. So while the rest of the UK has them, they literally are, the last count I think it was 15, but I haven't looked for a year. So there's a handful of hostels, and some of those hostel environments, they've been positioned for both genders. So they're taken over by women, and men don't get to go in there. So you were ahead of the game, right? Completely ahead of the game. Violence Against Women and Girls over in the rest of the UK has taken those policies, risk management systems, and has annihilated them. Now, you've got a process coming on where the Violence Against Women and Girls policy is being discussed, and it should be. Not for anything pulling that out, it should be. But now in the rest of the UK, they're now starting to talk about, well, actually, we need to start looking at men and boys. So they're now looking at integrating and how can we fit all of the things together that you've already started talking about a long time ago and promoting. So the reason why we came here and we came to Northern Ireland was I have delivered services in partnership with female services in the UK for a really long time. Hostel, my temporary accommodation, permanent accommodation, and my support team supporting them. So when I realised what you were doing, we always had a men and boys strategy plan, so we always had that. I would like to see in place a UN men. In 2010 we had a UN women, in 2011 we had the Istanbul Convention. That's the way it worked, and then it was asked to be ratified throughout. My dream is that we also have a UN men. I feel as a woman, I can't stand beside a man knowing that they haven't got the same processes in place to access the same services and move forward with that. And thankfully, there are a lot of professional women now who are recognising the same thing. And they're saying, excuse me, that's not acceptable to me, okay? So I'm going off track now, and I did put the slides up because I really want you to ask people questions, and I know it's quick. So in Northern Ireland, we are asking that we came looking at whether services have an equal approach and whether it's actually working, and whether through the Violence Against Women and Girls policy consultation process, whether that was being carried out in the right way. So there's one question I will ask, and I'm going to regret not being able to talk to you about loads of stuff afterwards, but that's all right. Does anyone know when government departments are supposed to equality screen a new policy? And if Tony's still here, I know Tony knows, because he's there. So do you know when they're supposed to screen impact? Does anybody know? Okay. So the answer is before and at the time that a particular decision or policy is being considered. Now, with your violence against women and girls, you're two years down the line, and that impact still hasn't been done. So all the things that are wrapping around the violence against women and girls policy at the moment, the impact that policy will have on services and the environment hasn't been done, and it should have been done prior to that starting. So there's communication that needs to happen. One of the things that I wanted to say to you all is, I don't know where you're situated with being part of that consultation process. My role here and split the difference what we want to do. We just want to make sure men get the same journey. That's all. That is literally it. I want men to have the same opportunities with the same understanding and the same ability to thrive. We actually work on 13 areas. It's not just domestic abuse. We work on education because everywhere we looked, they had inequalities. You know, just to throw a few examples, because I know I'm going to have to let you go now, but just 6.2 of the Sustainable Goals and Water Goals states that by 2030, water will be free from defecation, particularly for women and girls. Okay. Now, there are more men and boys die from defecated water in the world. Okay, so there's water and health. In the UK, in the health departments, we have preventative cancer screening for breast and cervical cancer. We have a major killer of prostate cancer. There is screening out there. We have no preventative screening for that. We have no preventative screening for testicular cancer. So that's another one of the things. So equality in our policy and the way we approach men in society is way off mark. It's way off mark in many areas. To pull it back to this though, we are going to be here for as long as it takes for us to be able to help share what we know with everybody who wants to know it. But the promise that you've got on your chair, that is a first stage promise for us. It's just to get people to say, look. Okay, sorry. Can't hear me in the back. Sorry. The promise is a first stage for us to be able to say to people, can you consider the promise individually? Can you incorporate it in your organisation? Can you talk about it over your social media? Because there's no harm in that. There's no harm for anybody in the promise. And the next step for us is we are going to speak to people who are interested. We want a strategy group. And we want one that's made up of people who do want to influence, can influence in their own environment, can influence outside of their own environment, and forgive me because this could be seen as a bit, but have professional courage, because there's a lot of assumptions that go on around the people that come through the doors, and the narrative at the moment attached from the UK, the rest of the UK, right, recognises now it's got it wrong. It is Wales, Scotland, they're all taking steps. They're saying, we've got this wrong, something's gone wrong. We want people to join us and to say, okay, we don't want to get it wrong from the start. We want to get it right from the start. We want a violence against boys and men strategy. We don't want to take the violence against women and girls strategy away from women. That's not our intention. But we want something the same that understands men, how they work, and is willing to listen to them, so that their risk management systems in every single area of the workers delivered in services is covered with their voice attached to it and their ability to thrive. So for us, the next stage is contacting all of you that have attended today. We will ask you whether you'd be interested to join us and to build a strategy group. We are praying that some from statutory services, some from sector services, not necessarily just domestic abuse, because the wraparound services around family court systems, health, education, police, criminal court, they matter as well. Their voice matters to stakeholders. I'm a stakeholder person. So we'll ask as many people as we can to join in. It is our January target. So if you would kindly consider, and when you receive the email, please let us, just put your name down and join us. We'll make it work. I know that you get asked this all of the time. I've been to so many conferences that it's crazy. Will you please fill the sheet? Will you please not put it in your bag and say, yeah, I'll contact you next week and then forgot. Will you please spend a minute filling your sheet? The reason is you can tell us what we're doing wrong, what we need to do right. If you want to tell me to shut up, then tell me to shut up. Seriously, because we want to keep it real. We just work from truth and evidence. So we were supposed to do a chat, a group of people standing up here. Would you like that to happen? Because it's 2:10 and I get told off for keeping things going longer than they should. Would you like a question and answer? Is there anything that you'd like to ask anybody that presented today? Kerry is amazing because he's running frontline services here. And I know we all form attachments in our professional. I haven't got to know many people at the moment, but Kerry's voice is worth listening to. Sky approaches this in a really good way. A really, really good way. So if you'd like to ask any of us questions, the lovely Rachel. If you want any of our contact details, we'll send them to you. We're very much get in touch. Mobile phone numbers will be on there for me and for the rest of us, I assume. So is that okay with all of you? Is there anything burning that you want to leave and say, oh, I should have flipping said that? Yes.